Glad to have you out this morning. Glad to have Jesus out. Like I said a while ago, I don't leave home without him. He has been good to the Lackey family. Yes, he is. He is my MasterCard. You continue in prayer for me this morning to talk to you just a little bit. You know, we talked last week about the Word, and hey, this is who God is. This is His Word. And there's no prophets like the Hebrew prophets all through history. You know, you see the fortune tellers and all these folks. I saw one time said that, y'all probably remember Jean Dixon from years ago. And Jean said she got 86% of her prophecies right. Well, 86% would have got you killed in the day of these prophets. If you called yourself a prophet, you better be right, because it invites you to a rock concert and you'd be the star. If you come along and said God said something and it didn't come to pass. This book tells us about our salvation. It tells us about our past. It tells us about our present. It tells us about the future. And there's somewhere around a quarter of it is prophecy, where God has told us what is going to happen. And only God can do that, folks. You know, men, you can guess what's going to happen tomorrow, but when God inspired this word through the prophets, He wasn't guessing. He'd already been in tomorrow. And if He put a quarter of this book into prophecy, it's because He wanted us to know what was happening. And I'm not a prophecy teacher. I don't know enough of history and to put everything together, but I know God. I know the one that inspired this Bible. And some things in here, folks, it's so plain that it surprises me that how we miss it. But the day that we're living in, folks, God has already given us better than CNN could ever tell you. God has given us the news of what's happening. And everything that we see happening around us today, folks, has got some bearing on prophecy being fulfilled. And we see everything coming together. And there's nothing, let me say this, nothing more important. I mean, we can know all about the prophecies. We can study these things and get excited over them, and I do. But there's nothing more important than knowing Jesus as your Savior. Because when it's all said and done, folks, when we stand before God, the only thing that's going to matter is, what did you do with Jesus? What did you do with the blood I shed for you? But it's an exciting time we're living in, but it's also a very troubled time. But God has told us about it. And you know, He wants us to know so that we know how to pray, we know how to witness, and we know how to stand, folks. If you don't know where you're at in time, the devil will slip something on you. I mean, he will. Because this whole thing is on a time. You know, we have to have the timing right if we're going to stand in these last days. Know where we're at in time. And Isaiah 46, 9 through 10 says this. God speaking through the mouth of the prophet said, "Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is none else." You got that? I don't care what the religiously correct crowd says. God said He's God and there is none else. Not a bunch of gods, just one. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying, "My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure." He said, I am God, and I know the past, I know the present, I know the future, and there's no God beside me. What I said, I will cause it to happen. I will bring it to pass. And folks, God operates on His own word. God does not operate outside His word. He does not surprise us with something that He's not told us about. Hey, we wouldn't know it was God unless He put it in this word, unless He put it in our spirit through His Spirit. But we can look back and remember the things of history and see God's hand in it when we know what the Bible said. And we can know the things that are coming. He said, I've already declared it, because I am God, and He will see to it that it happens. Declared means I hadn't hid it, I said it so you'd know. I spoke it so that you'd know. And throughout the Old Testament, folks, there are things that are orchestrated, God has orchestrated as a type or form of something that is coming, so that we would know that it was His hand in it. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9 says this, and we need to get this: the thing that has been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. And these things keeps happening in a circle because we got the same enemy, and folks, we're the same men, same people that people has always been. But the enemy knows how to pull our strings because he's been doing it for so many years. And so the things that he brought to pass back, in those days, that he did back in those days, he's trying again now. There's all kind of types and shadows in the Old Testament that has to do with what is happening right now. So if we lay down our emotions and the things that religion tries to form for its own purpose, we see God, who is and who always has been God, showing his servants the things that need to know and to be prepared for, so that we can tell folks what's coming down. We see God in God's Word. And the government of Antichrist, and we're moving into that time, folks, we must know this. As we come into the end of the age and the church is going out of here, the government of Antichrist will be set up immediately when the church leaves. So the foundation is being laid even as we speak. And it will be a socialistic dictatorship with Islam as the spiritual voice behind it. And knowing this, we can understand the trends that we see emerging today when millions of American voters are openly backing socialism and communism. Folks, why is this happening right now? It's because of where we're at in time. And every year, the idea of letting the government run everybody's life is getting stronger and stronger. Hey, it's not by a chance, folks. God saw it to start with. These things are happening. And again, Islam, even after all they've done, we have a sector of the people that's in America that still wants to embrace it. Christianity has become the evil and Islam is the good. You notice that? When the planes hit those towers, everybody was all up in arms. And what do? We turned around and voted them into our government. We call them a peaceful religion. Folks, they're not a peaceful religion. They are a demonic religion. And they will be the spiritual backing behind the Antichrist. How do I know this? We read it this morning. And John saw in Revelation people being beheaded for the witness of Jesus. Folks, there's not a religion, there's not another organization in the world that is still beheading people except one. It's Islam. And they're beheading people today because of their testimony of Christ, folks. So it will be the spiritual power behind the Antichrist government, which will be a dictator socialist government. And we see in Genesis 47 a man called Joseph. I want us just to read a little bit of this. Now Joseph, God raised Joseph up to save his people, and Joseph was the savior of the Israeli people. They was down in Egypt. But Joseph was a disaster for the Egyptian people. And one thing we have to know, Joseph was not an Egyptian, but he was raised up to be the leader of Egypt at this time. So Genesis 47, everybody got that? Verse 13 says this, and there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. Number one, there was a crisis. A crisis, and the devil always works in crisis. You remember when Ron Emanuel said a few years ago, never let a good crisis go to waste? So if there's a crisis, and the reason the devil can use a crisis because in times of stress, folks, we make dumb decisions, don't we? I mean, I know I have. I've made some dumb decisions, got myself further in the hole because I was under stress at the time. But they was under stress in Egypt at this time. There was famine in the land. And look at this. Now, Joseph is the leader. Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought. And Joseph brought the money unto Pharaoh's house. In other words, Joseph took complete control of the money. And and when the money failed in the land of Egypt, in the land of Canaan, and all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. In other words, the money was no longer any good. The money failed. Let me tell you something, folks. We go in debt more and more every year. And we've got nothing to back it up. And sooner or later, folks, there's going to be a crash. Now, we're looking good right now. The economy is humming, but there's going to be a monetary crash one day because we keep building paper money and nothing to back it up. Once it's called in, folks, and there's nothing to back it up, it becomes worthless. This is what happened, folks, to the Roman Empire. Their money was precious metals. And if you got a $10 piece It was on the market. It was worth $10 because it was gold or silver. But when the politicians got a hold of the money, they began to spend the gold and the silver and make the money out of cheaper and cheaper stuff. And after a while, their money was no good. The great Roman Empire fell from the inside, folks. And what we're seeing right now is a falling from the inside and a moving into, let the government take care of me. When you do away with God, somebody's going to have to take care of you. And people's looking to the government as God, and they was in this day. The money failed, and they were hungry, and they came to Joseph. When the money failed, in all the land of Egypt, the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread. And Joseph said, give your cattle, and I will give for your cattle if money fail. I will give you for your cattle if money fails. I'll give you bread for your cattle. In other words, I'm taking over the industry. The cattle was the industry, folks, that they had going for them. You know, they were farmers. Without the cattle, they had nothing. And Joseph said, I'll take your cattle and I'll feed you. So he took over. Number one, the money had failed. Joseph had gathered all that he needed for Egypt, for himself, and now he's taken control of the industry. And they brought cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses and for flocks and for cattle and of the herds and their asses, and he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. You see that? Joseph has complete control of everything that they got. He's feeding them. Folks, that's socialism. That's let the government take care of me. And I saw yesterday, some of y'all may have saw it, where they'd got some of Bernie Sanders folks talking on the mic, and they said if they didn't get Bernie as the Democratic nominee this time, that they was going to burn down cities. It would take the National Guard to stop them. Most of the time, socialism don't start shooting until after they're in power, but they're threatening to start shooting before they're in power, folks. And the whole world is looking, because look, when we moved God out, the whole world started looking for somebody to take care of them. If God's not there to help, if God's not there to answer your prayers, the government will. And it never has worked, folks. It didn't work in this time except for Joseph and Joseph took care of his own people, but his own people were not the Egyptians, folks. The Egyptians, he absolutely brought the Egyptians into slavery. And when the second year was ended, they came to him, verse 18. The second year and said, we will not hide it from my Lord, how that our money is spent. My Lord also has our herds of cattle, and there is aught left in the sight of my Lord but our bodies and our lands. He said, you got everything, so we're going to sell ourselves to you. Socialism at its best. Wherefore shall we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh, and give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate. All right, here we come. He's got the money, he's got the industry, he's got the seed. And have you noticed that you can't hardly find a homestead seed anymore? It's all hybrid. The governments, and it's not just America, folks, the governments of the world are beginning to hybrid all the seed under the guise that, hey, it fights disease, and it does. Some of them do. You know, they're not as prone to disease. But when you hybrid the seed, you've got 1 year and it no longer produces. You can't save seed. You've got to go back to the government for the seed. This is what Joseph did, and that's what's happening now. Joseph brought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them, so the land became Pharaoh's. And there is a push right now to do away with private land ownership. Hey, that's what socialism does. The government becomes God. And as for the people, he removed them to the cities from one end of the border of Egypt, even to the other end thereof. Only the land of the priests brought he not, for the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, and did eat their portion with Pharaoh, which Pharaoh gave them, wherefore they sold not their land. In other words, he took care of the religion that was backing him. Hey, man's a spiritual being, and the devil knows that. And so he's going to offer them a religion that's called Islam in this time. But hey, he's pushing the world into a one world order. You ever heard that phrase before? A new world order? Well, it's going to be a new world order. But it ain't going to be what folks thinking that it's going to be. But the seed, the government is beginning to control the seed. Now, and what we see, folks, happening around us has been taken from the playbook of a global initiative passed by the UN in 1992. It was called Agenda 21. Some of y'all probably have heard of that. And see, and they covered that up. They say, oh, it's not binding. Well, it's not, but governments over the world right now are trying to implement it. See, and it was the New Green Deal. Everybody's heard of that AOC just came up with. It's not a New Green Deal. It's Agenda 21 repolished. And the New Green Deal says this: we've got to save the planet. There's your crisis. We're destroying the planet. And she is advocating doing away with the cattle, doing away with the hog industry, doing away with the chicken business. Because to save the planet, folks. And I mean, that sounds crazy, but I mean, that's what's being advocated. And you'd be surprised at the money that she is gathering from big money people to push this agenda. So if you do away with the meat industry, what you got left is vegetables. That's all you can have then. And if the government controls the seed, guess what? They will control you. But see, it's just a new global agenda, and it's a repolishing of Agenda 21, and now they're calling it Agenda 2030. They say they want everything in place by 2030. But see, they're leaving out the God factor. They're trying to do all these things, say we can do it. We can save the planet. Well, why ain't they saved it already? Now, read Revelations. They don't save it. There is a God, and He's still God. But this is what we're seeing, and it's happening just like it happened in the days of Joseph. The government, not just American government, but all over, the government is trying to make sure that they stay in power by putting the thumb on the lives of everybody, saying you do exactly what we say, and they're doing it under the guise of saving the planet. You know, we're going to do away with all this cattle and all this chicken business and all the hog business, and we'll save the planet. Come on, folks. It's a made-up crisis. It's a made-up crisis. It's a control. But they're saying now that by 2030 they want it implemented. And it's not just an American thing, folks. It's a world thing. But it is setting up for an Antichrist government that is coming. And is anybody listening? Once the government has outlawed the meat industry, and all you got left is vegetables to eat, and the government's got the seed, guess what? You are slaves, whether you like it or not. And this is exactly what is happening. And I know this is not a typical of Sunday morning meeting, but hey, if God hadn't wanted us to know this, He wouldn't have put these things in His Word. Folks, unless you are prepared for what's coming, if it hits you suddenly and you don't know, you begin to think, well, maybe God has forgotten me. Where is God? No, He hadn't forgot you. He knows all this all the time. And don't you let the devil make you afraid with these things. Just aware of them so you'll know how to pray and you'll know how to witness. Because we're seeing the government of the Antichrist coming into full measure right now, which means the church is about to leave here. Before the Antichrist can come into full power, the church has to be gone. And when the church is gone, the religious order of that time then will be worldwide Islam. And the government worldwide will be communist, socialist, communist. And the people will be slaves to a government who is listening to the enemy, totally listening to the enemy. Where do you think killing all these babies in the womb come from? It didn't come from God. Where do you think that homosexuality, this great push for homosexuality, where did that come from? It didn't come from God. God made them in the beginning, male and female. Folks, so the devil always tries to turn God's plan into something else, because God's plan is the way of life, and the enemy's plan is the way of death, folks. What we're seeing, we ought to be able to see it plain. But look at Isaiah 10, speaking of Antichrist, and look what he said about him. Isaiah 10. These prophets never missed anything because they wrote what God had given them. You know, it'd be better if I got an Isaiah instead of Jeremiah. Y'all got to look over me. He's talking about the Antichrist and how that he will take over. And verse 13 says this: for he said, and Isaiah called him the Assyrian, and the Antichrist is called an Assyrian in several different places. He's called the beast. He's called that old serpent, the dragon. But here in verse 13, talking about the Antichrist, he said, by the strength of my hand I have done it, and by my wisdom, for I am prudent. I have removed the bonds of the people. And that word in the Hebrew means borders. I have done away with the borders. You ever heard that? And have robbed their treasures, and I have put down the inhabitants like a valiant man. And my hand has found as a nest the riches of the people, and as one gathers eggs that are left, have I gathered all the earth. And there was none that moved the wing or opened the mouth or peeped. Do you see this? The Antichrist said, I gathered the whole earth, and I have gathered their riches, and nobody has said anything. Because they can't. But because when he takes control, folks, he will have total control of everything. Now, again, under the Agenda 21, and what's being pushed right now under the new Green Deal. Remember back under Obama when the EPA passed the order that all water belonged to the government, that you couldn't even catch rainwater? Now, Trump came in and relieved some of those regulations. That's the reason they hate Trump, and that's the reason Trump can't stay, folks. He cannot stay because, hey, he threw a monkey wrench into what was going good for the globalist. And they're never going to stop. But see, under the rule of the EPA, the government controlled all the water. You can't build a pond on your land. You can't catch rainwater on your land. They said even the mud holes belong to the government. You couldn't get water out of a mud hole without doing it illegally. You see what's being pushed? Can't catch rainwater. If it runs off your house, it belongs to the government. You can't catch it, you can't use it. But all of this is the move of pushing us into the Antichrist government. And because you won't see it in the next month, 2 months, even in the next few years, you know, a lot of folks will let that slip from their mind. But folks, we're seeing it building, and it's going to be built. It's been taken from that playbook under the guise of, and they call it sustainable development. We've got to have a sustainable development. The whole world has got to be under one order, or we can't get it done. And see, way back in Winston Churchill's time, he said the only way that we was going to have world peace was have a one world order with the authority to enforce its rules. The devil even put in his mind this seed. He said the devil always tries to counterfeit what God's doing. That's coming in one world order, a real one world order. But what you see in building is not it. When Jesus gets here, he will bring peace to the earth. Till he gets here, there's not going to be any. And all of these fly-by-night plans is the plan of the enemy to make you a slave to the government. He said, the Antichrist said, I've gathered the whole earth, and I've robbed their treasures, and no man said anything. In Revelation 6, John sees the judgments coming on earth, and make no mistake, the Antichrist and his plan is judgment for man rejecting God's plan. Look at that. Let's just look at that for a minute. Revelation, what John saw, Revelation 6, when he saw these judgments happening. Verse 5, and when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances. Everybody understands what balances is. Perfect weights. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Now what we're seeing here, folks, is a government that is doling out to the people what they want them to have. And I saw where a fellow had wrote, and he said under the days rule, what this would read, a measure of wheat or a loaf of bread would be a day's wages. A penny in those days was a day's wages. So he said bread would be a day's wages. But we see the government said don't hurt the oil and wine. In those days, oil and wine was what the rich folks had. And he said, in other words, we're going to keep the government sustained. We're going to keep them in good, rich. We'll keep them rich and powerful. We're going to give to the people. We're going to balance it out what they need. This is the socialistic government of the coming Antichrist, folks. And we're seeing it. We should be seeing it. If you cut the TV on, you're seeing it whether you know you're seeing it or not. It's happening right now, today. But like I said, We are a microwave generation. If we don't see it happen in the next 5 minutes, we forget that it's happening. And hey, that's just the truth. That's the way that we have come to. Because in America, all this time, we've been so blessed in America that we stink. Come on, we got so used to having everything our way that we're not noticing anything. And when America falls, the whole world will fall in place with the Antichrist. And America is dying from the inside, folks. And I love this country. I mean, hey, I've been here all my life. I love it. I love everything it stood for in times past. But the Antichrist said, I'm gonna remove the boundaries. Do you see all these folks holler, don't build a wall, open the borders? It's part of a plan. Europe has already done that. And look at Europe. What a mess. What a mess. But the Antichrist will have a one world order or a one world disorder, and he will rule the people with an iron fist until Christ gets here. But if we're going to be the light that Christ set us to be, we need to be telling folks, open your eyes. These things are not just happening accidentally right here, right now. They're happening because the enemy has always had a plan, and God's always been one step ahead of him. And it's all in this book, folks. It's all in the book. You know that's got to be frustrating to the devil. Every time he comes up with something, God's already got it in the book. So every plan he come up with, God gives you a spirit to see him. If you can see him, you can defeat him in what he's doing. But if you can't see him, he will beat you to death. Hey, a kid, knee high, if you couldn't see him, would take a broomstick and whoop everybody in this church. If we could see him. But once you see him, you can take control of the situation. And the devil's crowd knows exactly what they're doing. But I'm afraid too many Christians have gotten so used to what I call sweet religion that we're not seeing anything. Not as a whole. Not as a whole. One of these Sundays we made one experiment and just send one to this church and one to that church and see what's being taught. We need to know. And it's not to condemn folks. It's to tell folks, hey, wake up. There's a king coming. And there's an Antichrist coming. And we need to warn the folks that's going to be left here not to be left. Hey, folks needs to know that there's a way out. But know this, if you don't go out with Jesus, you're going to be caught up in this mess, and it's coming. And it's coming very quickly. And we are one presidential election away for America to fall in line. One. Look at the candidates that's running. If either one of them beat Trump, if either one of them defeats Trump, by this time next year, you'll be in a socialistic government, and the world will follow. But look at Virginia, what's already happened. See, they got a governor in Virginia who is just totally ignoring the Constitution, doing what he wants to. I saw a lady on a YouTube yesterday. She was in Virginia, and she said that they told everybody they had these laws up and give a time that they could come and give their voice. But before they got there, they went ahead and voted ahead of time. It was already passed for the people who got there to voice their voice. They'd already pushed these things through. So they have already took control in Virginia. And don't think it's going to stay in Virginia, folks. It's coming one state at a time. And like I said, we're one presidential election away. And I'm not trying to be political, folks. I'm just trying to tell you that the Bible tells us that these things are coming. And they're coming. And Trump's done a whole lot for this nation, but he's not Christ. And what the Bible says is going to happen is still going to happen. That's what I try to tell people. So many people has got their faith in Trump. No, you better put your faith in Jesus, because Trump is a man. You know, and look, he's done a lot for this country, and I think he loves this country. But he cannot stay as president. He can't. I think God gave us a little reprieve right there, but so much of America don't understand what's happening and don't know about that. Don't understand the reprieve. But the next one up, the next president up, and I don't care who he is, the next president up will push the one world order into being. Jot that down. That's on tape. Get the tape. It'll be there next year. The next president after Trump will put America in the one world order. of the Antichrist, of the coming Antichrist. See, the kingdom's got to be set up before he gets here. He's not just going to all of a sudden step forth and with nothing set up. He's going to step forth and take over what's already been set up for him. And the devil has been working on it for years, folks. He's worked on it from the very beginning. See, he like I said, everything that God does, the devil tries to make a counterfeit. He did it with the church. When Jesus came along and said, upon this rock, told Peter, upon this rock I'll build my church. And when Jesus died and was ascended, immediately the devil started building the church. And if you didn't belong to that church, the government came down and cut your head off after a while. For many, many years, the church had the authority to force you into belonging to that church. And the church that Jesus established went into what we call the Dark Ages for years. But see, the devil had a counterfeit, and he's still got a counterfeit working, folks. Everything that you see that says church is not church. Does it teach this Jesus? I mean, we've come to the place where if it told Jesus in there, hey, they must be all right. But is it this Jesus? Jesus was a common name in the time of the Bible, folks. It's the same name as Joshua. It was a common name. But it's only one was the only begotten Son of God. Only one. It's not, it's feasible to think that even when he was born, that they was, in his community, there was probably several Jesuses. But he was the only begotten Son of God, just the one. And he's still the one. And just because you throw that name in does not mean God has sanctioned what you're doing. Look at the Word. If it's not the Word, then God ain't sanctioning it. But what we're seeing, see, Jesus is coming, and the Bible says that he will rule the world with a rod of iron. He will rule the world in righteousness when he gets here. And the devil is setting up a counterfeit. And you know what the Antichrist will say when he gets here? I'm God. I'm God. The Bible said he'll sit down in the temple of God in Israel and say, I am God. And the world, he will be the God the world has been preparing for all this time, folks, because he will be all man, everything that is appealing to the flesh part of man, he will appeal to. He will offer peace. He will offer security. He will be teaching if it feels good, do it. Man will love him. Man will love him. Just like now, when you're looking at the government, all these people promising everything out of the government. Men love that free stuff. Well, folks, there's nothing free. Nothing's free. If the government can give you something free, it's because they took it from somebody. They took it from somebody. Don't get caught up in these things. But folks, if we don't go out of here, when the church goes out of here, the temptation will be very, 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 very great to join those that looks like, hey, they're getting along all right. The devil can. If the government of the Antichrist looked bad to the world, folks, he could never come into power. It'll look good to the world. He'll look like the answer to the prayers. And if we don't stay close to Jesus, he'll look like our answer too. But the Islamic people, they teach the Antichrist as the 12th Amman, or the 12th leader that's coming. And they say when he gets here, he will break the cross and bring all people under Islam. And so they're looking at the Antichrist as their savior. They say he'll ride in on a white horse. The Bible said that too, didn't it? And they will accept him in the world because, hey, the world is already embracing Islam, and they will accept him too when he gets here and begins to say, well, I'm going to see to it that you have food. I'm going to see to it that your children are educated. I'm going to see to it that you have shelter. And the world will say, all paid for. There it is. I'm going to make everything equal. That's his voice now. That will be his voice then. I'll make all things equal. And that's what the Agenda 21 is all about, is bringing all nations on an equal keel. You can't do that, folks. You can't do that. But you can give all nations an equal opportunity. But if you start saying we're going to bring all nations, or if we start saying we're going to bring all people up on an equal keel, and some folks ain't going to be working for what they're doing. Others, they're going to be taking what the others work for. But see, that's the message of the Antichrist is, I'll do it for you. Let me do it for you. And it's so appealing nowadays. And so the foundation is being laid, folks, every day. And I guarantee you, this week when you look at the news, watch what they're saying. Watch what's being pushed. And you'll see it right here in this word. It hadn't surprised God. But the only thing that stands in the way of the Antichrist government being established in the world right now is the United States. It's been the beacon of hope for people for so long. And we're losing it, folks. We are losing it from the inside. Do I like to say that? No, but if I didn't say that, I'd be lying, and you'd know it. You'd know I was lying, because you can see the America that you and I knew when we were young coming up is gone. You notice now that everybody's offended about everything, and nowadays you're either racist or sexist. Something's wrong with you if you don't follow that crowd. I saw yesterday on Facebook, this guy put on there that he was a proud atheist, been an atheist since 2015, and see, he was bragging on how intelligent he was. And I'm sitting there thinking, no, stupid has got to declare yourself stupid. You ever notice how stupid declares itself stupid? Stupid won't stay quiet. It'll say, look, I'm stupid. I mean, it will. But see, they're proud that they have rejected life. And a lot of folks out there is proud that they've rejected life because they think they've got the answer. What always gets me is every atheist I ever talked to thought he was an atheist because he was absolutely intelligent. Now you take a brain that you think happened by accident and you think it can figure out all the mysteries of the universe. It's an accident to start with, according to them. Folks, again, that's the enemy saying, hey, you're smart enough to do it on your own. Let me tell you something, folks, we're not. I'm not smart enough to know on my own, and you're not either. You're not smart enough to work your way into heaven, and I'm not either. It takes Jesus. So in these last days, if we're going to ever stand for Jesus, and kind of the testimonies kind of went that way this morning, we're going to stand for Jesus, we better stand on what he's said and never give up. Never give up. Hey, because we're in for a battle. We're in for the battle of our men's souls. Salvation is free, but it wasn't free to Jesus. He paid for it with a great price. But it's free, but we have to reach people with the message of salvation. And it's got to be something they can see in this word. Hey, used to you could come along and just witness to people how Jesus died for them and win, folks. But that ain't happening anymore because the devil has educated people. He has educated them to believe a certain way. You know, I saw this week where they had a children's book. Barnes and Noble had put out a children's book and was portraying the president as a pig. And you know, they're teaching this in kindergarten. They show this in kindergarten. And if you could look at the television, I don't care what program you're looking, look at any program you want to look at, watch the advertisements and watch the program, and you can see the agendas being pushed on every day on the media. Yesterday they turned it on, there's two men kissing. They said, love who you want to. Yeah, you can love who you want to, folks, but that's not love, that's lust. And it'll destroy you. But you know, again, white people are bad. You see that pushed everywhere. Comedians make jokes about it. And see, it's again, let's do away with the white race because they are the evil. And I'm not into the race stuff. I don't care what color your skin is, what color is your heart. Have you been to Calvary for your salvation? But you can, you know, that's the reason they call them programs. They're programming you to become insensitive to everything that's happening. You know, you see all this on the television and it looks all normal and happy. Everybody's drinking, everybody's smoking, everybody's doing their own thing. You ever noticed that? It's to program your mind to think everybody's all right. Everything's fine. Look how much fun they're having. Folks, that fun will end up in eternal damnation. But that's what the devil is looking for. And we're seeing these things come to pass. Let's rise up and make a difference. Don't be afraid to stand for Jesus and say and tell the world that he is the only way. The world ain't going to like that, and they don't like it. But it's still the truth. See, we're in that place now where the devil don't care if you believe in God, just not this God. Just, you know, you can believe in God, the devil don't care. Just don't believe in this God. Just, you know, you can go out there, and hug a tree and talk about the God of nature. The devil don't care because there is no salvation except in one, and that's Jesus Christ. And if you're sitting here this morning and you're saved, it's because you've been to Jesus. Not because you went by Buddha, taught and learned about Buddha or Muhammad. If you're saved, it's because you've come to Jesus and committed your life to him. Because Muhammad, folks, he couldn't save himself. He's still dead. So is Buddha. So is all those great religious leaders. They're dead. There ain't but one that's still alive. And he will be alive forevermore. And that's Jesus. Let's latch on to him like a bulldog. And whatever he says, let's listen. Wherever he goes, let's follow. If you're here this morning and you know that you've backed up, you know that you need to be, you're not where you used to be, let's get it right with him before we leave. Is that all right?